when things get tough, as a founder, like everything falls back on you, like the really tough decisions. Is that something that you thrive on? So to start the discussion, I thought, I would bring up some of the common reasons I hear for people wanting to start a company. And so for me, these are, the kind of fake differences between being a founder and an employee, or, said differently, why not to start a company? The first one I hear a lot is, I want to be my own boss, or, differently, I can't work for other people. I need to like make my own decisions. Like I can't work for anybody else. But the truth is that as a founder, you actually respond to everybody. Everybody's your boss. So you respond to your employees when they, need to know what the strategy is, when they need to be, what's a big vision to be motivated, to have retention. You respond to your investors who are asking for results, who want to see, all those plans that you sold to them during the fundraising. They want to see, where it's at. To your customers who are constantly demanding, more of you for obviously less money, and then your community for whom, your stakeholders for whom you have, standards and values to uphold. The other reason I often hear is, I like working in small teams. And I think this is kind of ironic because, if you're, trying or wanting to build a startup, once you've found that product market fit, you want to hit the gas, and scale as fast as possible. So no team is meant to remain small. That is not, clearly not a good reason to start a company unless you want to start like a small agency or something like that. Another reason, which I'm sure a lot of you on this call will resonate to, is I want to have impact, and that is a noble reason for wanting to start a company. But I will say this. As I put on the slide, like the employee who invented, Google Maps or Gmail or any other Google products probably had a bigger impact in the world than, an average founder. Big companies, they give you distribution, they give you scale. And, besides, working for a big company or working for a startup, there's just so many other ways to have impact in the world. There's, you can join as a, be on the advisory board for an NGO. You can create some communities in your free time. There's so many things, like easier ways to have an impact in the world than starting a company. This one is half a joke also, but people say, I want to become rich. I don't want to work for somebody else's getting all the upside of my work. But just know that, 80, the power law, like 80% of startups fail miserably. You're better off choosing a company that has some data points of early success, because then you can take a calculated risk and you still participate, in the upside that company will create. I think there was a slide. Yeah, this, sorry, somebody's not, make sure you're muted because I'm hearing an echo. Thank you. So being a founder is cool. And also these ones also have a joke, but some people will start companies just because it looks good on their CV. That is something that I have seen. Just like I want to have that kind of founder track on my profile. And again, building a company is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Like I seriously don't know why people do it. It's so hard and it's so nerve-wracking, stressful, and you always feel like you're dropping balls all over the place. So if you start a company just because you think it will look good in your resume, I think that that company is probably doomed to fail, and then it won't look that good anyway. So it's kind of counterproductive. But let's talk about what actually matters. So we can talk about autonomy, we can talk about vision, we can talk about alignment and risk. And so in terms of autonomy, it's not that in most early stage companies, autonomous people succeed. Is that only autonomous people can succeed in early stage companies. The team is so small, you're probably working with the founders and a handful of people. The team is so small that there's nobody there to manage you, to work on your career goals, to plan your career development inside the company, depending on the size at which you join, of course. But in early stage companies, because there's just so many things going on all the time and so many fires to put out, you probably have more visibility than the founder sometimes, and what are the areas for growth, and then you can jump on those opportunities and have, you know, tremendous autonomy on your career. In terms of the vision, if you're one of the first 5 to 10 employees, you'll have a tremendous impact in the company vision, as much as, almost as much as one of the founders, because you're just going to be shaping so many things, like the culture, the strategy, the direction of the company. And founders, there's so many decisions to make, and founders cannot do them all alone. If the team is less than 50 people, you'll still contribute a lot. And I think of an example at On Deck. For example, today we are hiring somebody to take care of our alumni network. And today, if you think about it, our alumni network is, you know what, ODF has alumni because they've had 8 cohorts. We have On Deck Writers that has some cohorts. We have On Deck Angels also that has some cohorts. But other than that, it's just a couple thousand people. But after we have, you know, 40 programs, and those 40 programs have about 10 cohorts each. I suck at math, but it's a lot of people. And that role that today is like, you know, it's not small because you're still taking care of a community of, you know, a couple thousand people, but it will be, you know, hundreds of thousands of people at when the company scales. So any role inside a early stage company has a potential to become this huge thing. And also good leaders, they make sure that the teams have ownership. So they let you set the strategy and execute on it. In terms of alignment, and by alignment, I mean, you know, having skin in the game. In terms of equity, the earlier you join, the more you'll have, obviously. But like the truth is, as an employee, you will never be aligned with the success of a company as much as its founder, but you're still exposed to significant upside. And there's a reason for that. You know, as an employee, if the company is not working out, or if it's not working out for you personally, you can always walk away. But the founder, they can't do that as easily. And they also took a bigger risk than you when they started the company, before there was any, you know, proof of success or any, you know, sign that that company was going to work out. So there is a reason for that. In terms of risk, you know, not, I was just mentioning it, the most important resource we have in our careers is time. And I see it a lot with founders who, actually I see it at home with my husband, who sold this previous company. And as you know, typically when you sell your company, during the earn-outs agreement, you have, you know, a period of time that you're locked up, where if you leave, you leave a lot of money on the table. And I've seen it in my career. I've seen it, you know, dozens of times, where founders, they leave, you know, half of the cash on the table, or millions of dollars in certain cases, because for them, just staying 1 year as an employee in a company is like torture, and they prefer to leave all that money on the table rather than stay 1 more year. And that's because time is the scarcest resource that we have as an employee or as a founder, and that's a huge risk, you know, that you're taking. So don't take it lightly when you're choosing the company that you work for, or being a founder. And so you may be asking yourself at this point, like, Erika, what is a good reason to start a company then? I think, you know, it's a cop out, but the best reason to start a company is because you have no choice. That means that you're either, you know, really obsessed with a problem that you want to solve, and it's like one of those things, like, you can't really get it out of your head, and it's been in your head for years, and you just have to like solve it, or you have to do something about it. Or you know, as my husband, you feel incapable of working on somebody else's idea. It's something that sometimes you just know. It's one of those things that you really just know. And I know I'm not really giving you an answer here, but there's I really like Michael Siebel's mini tests for, you know, knowing whether building a company is the right thing for you. So one of the things he says, he has 3 questions. The first one is, do I like being the underdog? So really, like, am I comfortable in a situation where nobody believes that I'm going to succeed? Like literally, like nobody, maybe only your mom. Is that something that you can handle? Do I seek the hard challenges that most people shy away from? Is that, something that when things get tough, as a founder, like everything falls back on you, like the really tough decisions. Is that something that you thrive on? Or do you prefer things, that are more manageable? Also, do I thrive and take when I take personal responsibility for successes or failure? That one's, pretty straightforward. Is it am I more the most comfortable when I have 100% skin in the game, and it all comes down to me. And if you answer yes 3 times, he says, well, maybe starting a company is the right thing for you. And and then the kind of nutshell of this is like there is a certain type of person who only works at their peak capacity when there's no predictable path to follow, when the odds of success are low, and when they have to take personal responsibility for failure. But the caveat is that this also applies to being an early stage employee. And I'm going to confuse you all over again, because I think, as an early stage employee, there are 3 core values. That's, again, to recap on the previous quote, there's no predictable path to follow. To me, that translates into curiosity. The odds of success are low. That to me translates into courage, to kind of face those odds and the uncertainty. And then the personal responsibility for failure, that's the humility to know that you are imperfect, and then sometimes you'll get it right, sometimes you'll get it wrong, but really embracing that mindset. But the only test that matters is really to just do it. Start a company and start something, and then that's the only way to really find out if it's for you. I tried last year. I joined ODF4 to see if I wanted to start a company, and I have a bias for action, so I know that as soon as I have something, I'm like immediately trying to do it, and then I didn't have that drive for action, and I said like, okay, this isn't for me. For now. I mean, who knows? But that was kind of the test for me. And so now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey as a first employee at the family, and doing everything for the first time. And the interesting thing about this sentence is that when I say that doing everything for the first time, people tend to get like focus on the part about the first time, but actually is everything part that was important, is doing everything for organizing events, going to do the groceries, cooking for our portfolio founders, to fundraising, to like I did every possible thing in the early days, but also throughout the years. So I like to put some pictures on the slides because it makes things like more concrete and more visible. Like that's what pictures are for. But in the early days, this was around 2013 when we started. We would, we were really inspired by YC, and we would organize homemade founder dinners. Like we would cook ourselves. And then after, 5 years later, we had bi-monthly banquets where we had 200 plus people coming over to our offices. We have a private chef, and we have people flying from all these places in Europe to join our dinners. Like when I got married, people were like, "Are you stressed?" And I'm like, "I organize a wedding a month, basically a dinner with like 200 people. This is a piece of cake." In the early days, we also had small workshops in French, and like one of the people sitting there is the bald guy is one of the Algolia founders that came to be a billion-dollar company. And then 5 years later, we had millions of views on our YouTube channel, 40,000 event attendees per year, and as I mentioned in the beginning, like one of the biggest founder communities in Europe. And as I said, like my roles over the years were from the early days crafting our early content and workshops, then building out our first partnerships, like our perks program for our portfolio. Then I created our first paid program for entrepreneurship, like the on deck before on deck 5 years ago. Building our international network. So I travel all over Europe and the US to build our international network and open our offices in London and Berlin, and for some time in Barcelona. I then fundraised for the company, which is typically a founder role, but I was the first employee and I was doing all these things. And at the end of the day, people kept asking me, how do I invest? And then people were like, well, you're better at this than we are. Why don't you do it? So I started fundraising. And then at the end, the last two things I did was I was our GM for France, which was our biggest market, and then structuring our late stage deal activity. So as you can see, like none of these things have anything to do with another. But I see this pattern very often with people who are first employees or one of the first, 5 employees in a company. They tend to kind of keep growing with the company and pivot from one role to another. And they sometimes have nothing to do with each other, but they vary according to the kind of needs of the company at that given time. So my lesson from this journey is, doing anything for the first time, because all the things that I did at the family, from, again, building communities to fundraising was something that I had never done before. I remember the first time I closed an investor, I came back to one of the founders and I was like, okay, what do I do now? How do I get the money in the bank? I had no idea. So, is the mindset that you can embrace as an early employee or even as a founder. And so finally, one of the last things I wanted to share some words of wisdom and unsolicited advice, kind of general. First thing is, like, we're all imposters. I love to say this because, even if there's like other people who've done it in the past, and people have written playbooks and share best practices, like nobody has ever faced the exact same situation that you're in today. For example, I'm launching On Deck internationally, but I bet you like there's not many people that have expanded a company internationally that's a community of cohort-based online networks and in a post-COVID world. Like nobody has done that before, right? So I'm inspired by other people who have done international expansion before, but I'm making up my own playbooks as I go along. Fear is your friend. So we are wired physically and in evolution to avoid pain. That is something that is a big driver for us as humans. And whenever, in my case, like whenever an opportunity, I find it scary, I use that fear as a data point, as a signal that that's where my growth opportunity is. And I usually try to use that fear as a driver and to let me know where I have to go. Another important thing is an early stage employee. No task is beneath you. Again, the things that seem like unimportant, there is nothing unimportant in an early stage company. Everything in the company can become huge over time, and there's only people without imagination. So I remember in my career, sometimes I was offered roles and I was like, this is shit. Like, I don't want this. But then I started to think about it. I was like, wait, I can actually make this really cool. And so once I got into that mindset, I turned that role into something that I really wanted to do, and it made it big and interesting. So that is just something to leave you with. A killer email would get you access to anyone. This may seem really basic, but I will say this, like I came to France, I wasn't really fluent in French. I'm from the Dominican Republic. I was a lawyer. Like I didn't go to Stanford. I didn't go to any of, I didn't work at Uber. And yet I have people in San Francisco asking me to introduce them to other people in San Francisco. And I made my network through pure hustle, through cold emails. And I have an appendix at the end that I can show if anybody's curious about like what I think makes a great email. But basically my strategy was always to chase people until they say no. When somebody says no, obviously back off respectfully, but I've, chased people like up to like 20 or 30 emails before I get a yes. And this was kind of, in the real hustle times, but really a good email can get you access to anybody. And yeah, the kind of the main takeaway from this is that you don't have to be a founder to be entrepreneurial about your career. Every promotion I got, I went for it. Like I can give you an example. When we started to expand internationally, our first office was in the UK. And I actually, because I'm Dominican, I have a shitty passport, or at the time I couldn't go anywhere without a visa. And so as soon as I heard that we were opening an office in the UK, I went to the embassy. I got an interview. I got a visa without nobody telling me anything. And I started going to the UK. I mean, this is a bit crazy, but I started going to the UK before they even gave me the job, and I started helping out. Well, of course, delivering on my core missions, but I went and did that. And then at the end, obviously, who was the right person to help, lead that international expansion? Me, because I had already positioned myself to do it. And so that is a mindset that is really, really helpful. Like, you want something, you go for it, and you make it obvious that is you the right person to do it. And that implies also, anticipating what a company will need, and start doing the job before you're asked to do it. And so you have to put the company first, of course, not just what you want to learn about or what your career goals are, but really where that intersection is of like what I want to do and what the company is going to need in the next phase.
I know we have a bunch of questions, and so would love to jump over to those, and I'll ask people to come up on the screen.
Yeah, actually, because somebody said like to share the email, I'm gonna share it because
Perfect.
we have some time. So the like my advice on like writing a killer email is like I usually split my emails into 3 paragraphs. The first one, it has what I'm asking. The second one is why they should do it, and the third one is a really easy call to action. And so you can see like this is an example of an email that I sent. This is an old screenshot, but basically like whenever I went to a new city and I wanted to meet new people, I sent everybody some version of this, first like, hey, I'm in your town, I would love to meet you. Second, this is why you should meet me. And third, like, let's meet on this date or let's meet on this time. And like I use that template for everything. And if you're a company, speaking to an investor, it's some version of this, like first paragraph is like, hey, this is who I am. The second is 3 bullet points on like, this is why I'm awesome. And the third one is like, I'm raising X amount to do Y. And would you like to talk to me, basically? A few more tips is like, again, be concise, ask for one thing. People often send emails where they have multiple call to actions. I think that's really bad. Just focus on the one thing that you want that person to do for you, and make sure that that's clear in the email. So the second one is be very clear and specific. People don't read, and usually when you think something is clear, you have to make it like really stupid clear what you're asking for. Name drop if you can. It helps sometimes. If you don't know anybody in common, it usually helps to like do some research about the person and end with a nice, phrase that feels like it's personalized to them. And then the last thing, as I said, be persistent. And I have a last slide. Like before, when I was fundraising, or when I was like doing something like a project and I had to reach out to a bunch of people, I would set a frequency of chasing them once a week. So every week I would chase, and then I would get really creative and I would send like gifts. I would send jokes. I would like reference tweets. Like I got really stalkerish on them. Like I'm not ashamed to say. And then I used to do it until I said no. And like this is one example just of an investor that we ended up closing. We had a first meeting and it was great, but then that person just like, you're not a priority to people most of the time. So people just tend to forget. And if they want to say no, we're all big people. They're going to say no. They're going to say like, please back off, please leave me alone. But most of the time what happens is that people actually want to reply to you. They actually want to help you. And you kind of feel it, like they would do something with you, but you're just not top of mind. And so you have to make sure that you stay top of mind until the right time comes. And of course, the frequency, you don't have to be as intense as I am, but set some sort of frequency that you're comfortable with. And I assure you that you'll get results. All right, that's it for the email part. Yeah, and so it works for job search as well, for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Erica. Mark, do you want to pop up and ask your question and kick off there?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Erica. Thank you for the presentation. I love the choice of words and the insights. So question, how do you decide which projects or responsibility to choose next as the team grows and you gain more influence? So for context, I've also been an early employee, and one thing that I realized is it's a unique position to have a lot of autonomy and flexibility, but you also don't have the full authority, right? So especially the founders will just say no and then you cannot do it. So we'd love to hear your thoughts how you navigate those situations.
Yeah, that's a great question. So not all founders are like that. So I like there were several questions to your question. The first one when you said like how do I identify those opportunities? There's a lot of like ifs to that situation because it has to do with your personal abilities, with what the company needs, and whether the founders want to do it themselves or they want to delegate that to you. In my case, it was more of it was usually the next logical step after what I was doing, even if like you look at what I did, it doesn't make any sense. But for example, when I accepted the job at On Deck to like launch us in Europe, I told David, our CEO, the first day, like my goal is to work myself out of a job. And then the obvious thing was kind of to take over international after, and it just sort of happened naturally. But I was already starting to, for example, and this is something like I'm kind of thinking of the answer as I go, but sometimes it's really about when you see an opportunity, leaning into that instead of backing away. So for example, when I was launching us in Europe, people started asking me like, what about Canada? And I'm like, what do you mean Canada? I'm all the way over here in Europe and you're asking me about Canada. But instead of like backing away from that, I will lean in and like say, okay, here's the average revenue per fellow. This is the number of applications we have in Canada. And I would just own it. When it came to fundraising, as I said, I used to have meetings with people to talk about my previous company. And at the end of the meeting, they would say like, hey, how do I invest? So instead of, saying like, oh, this happened 1, 2, 3 times. No, let me lean into that. And maybe I can be the fundraiser. And I was scared. Like, I had never fundraised before, but that ended up being the easiest job that I ever did.
Thank
I
you.
hope that answers your
Very
question.
helpful. Yeah, it does. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Uri, do you want to pop up?
Yeah, hi Erica. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the risk reward ratio of joining something super early, like sub 5 people versus starting your own company.
Joining something super early. Well, in this market, is really early is a totally different thing, because like joining something early before, it was less, it was more risky because people couldn't, like there was no such thing as a pre-seed round. There was no such thing as like a second time founder, or like there was, but not as many as we have today, or like the people with track records who can raise rounds right away and who can open doors and who can, you already know that company is going to have some success because of all of this data points. So as an employee, if you join a company that has already raised a significant amount, that has experienced founders, and that has a market that you're interested in, for which you can be, a game changer, you're already taking a reduced amount of risk, I would say. But what I commonly see is that, at the family, for example, because we were working all the time with startups, like I would say like 80% of my former colleagues went on to start companies, but ask me how many of them still exist today. Not many. So I would say that if you're joining something as like the very first employee, and there isn't any of those things that I was saying, like somebody who has a track record, a founder that can raise money easily, or that has already raised money, if there's none of those elements that kind of did risk your choice, is more or less the same. Like it's the same risk. You're just not getting the same upside. That is kind of my assessment of the situation.
Got it. We'll move.
But I saw that somebody posted an article by Eric where he talks about like starting a company is less risky. And as I said, like the real test, like if you're wondering if building a company is the right thing for you, just do it. Like ultimately, if you really want to do it, for the right reason, which is like I really want to know if building a company is the right thing for me, you can start by building a project, by doing a no-code thing, by going to ODF and collaborating with other people's ideas. Like there's some low risk ways for you to get started. But ultimately, like I don't want to like make this like anti-build a company talk, but I've seen it at home. I live with a serial like second time founder who's in a Series A company and with 50 employees. I know how hard it is. It is really, really the hardest thing you'll ever do, building a company. So that's why I'm like, if you want to do it, you have to be really sure that you're doing it for the right reasons.
I think that's super relevant to Dara's question, actually. Perfect segue. Do you want to share?
Erika, yeah, you kind of answered this in a way, but on the risk of starting a company, can you talk about employability after starting a company and failing? And what's that like trying to get back into the employee mindset?
I'll be real. Like, I'm not gonna give you like the Twitter answers. Like, for me, it really depends like how long you worked on that company that failed. It's not the same, for example, if you come and you worked on this company for 4 years and you have nothing to show for yourself, versus, you worked in a company for 6 months, it didn't work out, that happens to anybody, I guess there's like a 1 or 2 years of working on a failed company. It depends on like how you failed. For example, like if you worked on 1 or 2 years at a company and basically nothing happened, that's probably fine, depending on but you probably have to show like, what did you build? Like, did you build a product? Did you get some customers? Did you get some revenue? Did you close some partnerships? Did you at least build a community, even if you didn't monetize it? Like, what can you show for yourself? And then if it's after like more than 2 years, and these are all like made up numbers, right? That from my perception. But if you worked on something for more than 2 years and you really have nothing to show for yourself, then that to me is it's not problematic, but it's just like people are going to ask, what did you achieve in those 4 years that you were working in that company? The bar is higher.
Okay. Good to know.
I would add on top of that, for me, I spent kind of 6 months or so intensely working on like my business before joining On Deck. And the fact that I had done that, given the kind of the entrepreneurial bent of everybody who works on the On Deck team, was super beneficial when I was kind of talking about like, here's why this is the right fit for me and the program that I would look to build. Had I not kind of gone through the founding experience, it probably wouldn't have led me to this. And I wouldn't have been as like stronger. I wouldn't have been as strong as like an entrepreneurial person, because I wouldn't have actually like tried it before. It just would have been like side of desk, something I'm thinking about. So I thought it was super beneficial, but like, I don't know that I would have worked on my old idea for many years. It like wouldn't have, the trade-off, somebody, maybe Bernard dropped in the chat, like this distinction of like, how much time are you spending? And like, what's your alternative? Like what kind of job could you get? Or what are the other things that you could do?
Okay. Thank you guys.
Sorry. Uza, did you want to pop up? There's kind of some comments and question in there, I feel like, that are very relevant to the discussion.
Yep, absolutely. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So yeah, thanks, Erika, for joining us. I feel like I have to set up office hours with you so I can like pick your brain in depth. But yeah, I've so much. I feel like this session was for me. Like it was like calling it. Like you guys added me in the title, because this is exactly the existential crisis I'm going through, and I really appreciate On Deck for almost activating all these different sides, or all these different kind of like, thoughts in my head, right? Like I'm approaching On Deck. Obviously, I chose to do OD50 versus ODF, but doing things like the Global Build Weekend and connecting with other fellows, that itch to create like on an idea that I kind of been putting on the back burner, it's kind of come back, right? And so yeah, I mean, I've had these different threads of joiner versus founder versus investor and advisor. Like I just became an angel, or I guess became accredited last year, so I've been writing a few angel checks, and so like all these things are kind of happening concurrently. And so I'm kind of thinking through like, what is, at least for your decision process as someone who's kind of tried different things, do you have some of the same inclinations in like a lot of different directions, and just decide this is what I want to focus on right now, and kind of just keep some things in your notebook, just in case things kind of change later? Like I guess explain that thought process for you, like prioritizing something in the current time versus what might be in your in your notebook or in your backpack.
It's a really, thank you for providing all that context, and I'm glad that you're enjoying the session. So for me, I made a lot of decisions in my career based on intuition. For example, when I joined On Deck, it was already like kind of exploding in a way. Like the community was blowing up, but I had no idea that they wanted to build like a company like this ambitious. Like that's not really what I knew about the company when I started, working there. But then it just sort of revealed itself to me, and I think even to the founders themselves as a real opportunity. I think that I don't know if that has to do with my personality or if there's something that people like you and I, in that sense we share together, but I'm always tormented by the opportunities that are out there, the ideas. And I'm always thinking, am I using my time in the best way, that I could right now? And for example, the reason for me joining on deck initially was, I had this company idea, but I wasn't like acting on it. I wasn't actively building. I stayed on the research phase too long, and I felt like I was in a rut in a way. And I said, you know what? And a friend gave me this advice, which is amazing for me. I found it amazing. Was some decisions in life are easier when you're in movement. Like the horses. She's like, she rides horses, and she's like, it's like you're riding a horse, like easier to maneuver and control them when they're moving. And so that's why I decided to keep moving and to join on deck. And ultimately, I found that it was a perfect place for me. And do I still question if it was the right choice? Yes, all the time. But that is just like what being in my head is like, And so I think it's normal to have that itch. And I don't think that is something you I don't know if it's something that you have to like do, but I think that you have to at least try once in your life if you have that entrepreneurial itch, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. I'll definitely schedule some time with you if you have office hours. That would be great. For sure. It's been overdue.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think kind of related to that is Andrew's question. Do you want to pop up kind of nice, natural next step?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again, Erika. This is awesome. Yeah, I guess my question was kind of about the role of like, I think of both early stage employees and founders in a certain way as being like obsessed with a particular problem, or I guess this is even beyond like what I had typed out, but like there's a particular hypothesis they have about how to solve the problem that they connect to. And I guess, what do you see as like the role of making that decision? Perhaps like if you're really want to solve a certain problem, but you don't think anyone, like there's no company out there maybe that is approaching it in the same way that you think might be solved, or that you might have a unique skill set or insight. Yeah, I guess where do you see like kind of the role of obsession with the problem and or like uniqueness of a hypothesis in kind of thinking about the founder versus joiner distinction?
I think there's several layers to that question. So the first one is, there's a problem that you're obsessed with and you think that nobody's doing the right solution for it, but do you have the right skill set to build that solution? That's like the first question. Or do you have the will to build that solution? For example, one of the ideas that I had last year was around female hormonal health. And one of the main problems with the space that I was interested in is actually diagnostics. And I didn't want to build a diagnostics company. And the thing that I love building is community. So I started thinking, what could there be a community approach to the problem, maybe peer-to-peer patient support so that we can accelerate diagnostics. Like I was trying to find a way around it, but I ultimately wasn't able to come up with a solution that seemed to both address the main problem and leverage my unique set of skills to be able to provide a solution. So, in that sense, like if there is a company that is doing something that is close to what you want for that market or problem or solution, then you probably can join that and have a high impact because you already put a lot of thought into that. But ultimately, the founders have also put a lot of thought into that. So probably all the ideas that you think like you're coming in with all these fresh ideas are probably like, yeah, we thought about that and we didn't do it for this and this and this and this reason, So I think that is a good reason to start a company, to be like, nobody else is doing what they're supposed to do. So I want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Awesome. Dara, do you want to pop up? I know you had another question. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah. Hey, I'm back. So let's say I walk out of this conversation and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be a founder. This is it. When thinking about being a first-time founder, should you be like calculating about it, being like, okay, this is an easier problem to solve. Starting a company is hard to learn it on its own, so maybe I should tackle something, that's a lower hanging fruit, or tackling something that's harder, more unknown, but you're more passionate about.
It's a great question. It feels like so much responsibility for me to answer that. But the one thing I will say, like, I will answer like a side question that you didn't ask, which is, building a company takes a really long time. And I think this is something that people don't think about a lot. There's two things, like building a great company will probably take 8 to 10 years, like to get it to something really interesting. So first you have to work in a space that you find interesting and that you're committed to working in for the long run, because it really takes a long time to build a great company. But ultimately, a lot of the times what happens is that, you start building out something, but then your company becomes this completely different thing over time, because you pivot, because you adapt. Like on Deck, it started out as like in-person dinners. Who would have known they would have turned out to become like this call that we're all on right now? Like, who would have thought that? Nobody. And it would probably be something completely different in a couple of years again, right? So to answer your question about whether you should work on something really hard or something easy, I also think that, I reject your question, because building a company is hard. I don't think that exists. What you're saying, like building something that's easy, like that is not a thing.
Good to know. Makes my decision easier.
Awesome. Other questions or discussion topics related to this that anybody wants to pop up and mention?
I love that. Is that like birds in your background?
Oh, for me? Yeah, it is. Los Angeles, it's the best. Everyone should move to SoCal.
That's awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, just want to thank you, Erika, for spending time with us here today. I thought this was super insightful, and I think both from the perspective of somebody who's thinking about maybe founding something, and also the person who maybe thought they wanted to found something and is now perhaps thinking through, like, can I get the experience I'm looking for as an early employee? So thank you so much for spending time with us here today.